Good day, everyone. This is Ms. Cañete, and I will walk you through the concept on epidemiology as part of the course on community health nursing. For our learning outcomes, I assume that you have read them already prior to watching this video lecture. By this time, you have already noticed how epidemiology as a concept is threaded through the different nursing subjects. First, as part of the fundamentals of nursing, to understand the concept of health and disease. Then, when you reached level 2, you also had a discussion again of some epidemiologic concepts and has used the ecologic models to understand disease, causation. And then now, for level 3, where we are going to review some of those concepts you have had in the past, and then more, of course. This time, learning to get to know more about the body of knowledge, which is epidemiology. But first, we will cover some epidemiologic data on COVID-19, both national and global, and then reviewing the definition, uses, functions, and importance of epidemiology, tracing its history, then discussing the epidemiologic triad, reviewing again the theories of disease causation and the ecologic models, then understanding the disease spectrum through the discussion of the natural history of disease in relation to the 3 levels of prevention as intervention. And of course, understanding the community reactions towards disease as we discuss the epidemiologic investigations. All right? So much has happened in the last 6 months, but just to recall a few snaps of what happened, the COVID-19 pandemic in the Philippines is part of the worldwide pandemic of COVID-19, which is causing severe acute respiratory syndrome. And the virus reached our country on January 30 when the first case of COVID-19 was confirmed. That involves a 38-year-old Chinese woman who traveled from China. And then on February 2, the first death was confirmed. And this death is the first confirmed death outside the mainland China where COVID-19 originated, particularly in Wuhan. And then on March 7, the first local transmission was reported. And since then, the virus has spread. And if you can still remember, on March 15, the National Capital Region have been placed under community quarantine or a partial lockdown that was supposed to end until April 14. And if you remember at that time, our classes were suspended. And that community quarantine was even upgraded to the enhanced community quarantine in Luzon, which also ended on May 31. However, after placing the Luzon on general community quarantine after May 31, it was reverted back to MECQ or Modified Enhanced Community Quarantine on August 4 to 18 because of the decision made by President Duterte in response to the call of the healthcare workers for the timeout. Okay? So I'm sure you were able to follow through the news and the updates regarding the COVID-19. As I record this video, I visited the World Health Organization website and checked their Corona tracker. And here's what I got from their epidemiologic data. So as of August 4, the total confirmed case is around 18,565,604 cases, while the total recoveries have reached to around 11,767,514, while the total number of deaths reached to as high as 700,254. Okay, of course, I had to check the Department of Health Corona Tracker by checking their epidemiologic data as well. And here's what I got. So as of August 4, the total confirmed cases is around 112,593 with active cases of 44,429, 66,049 recoveries, and 2,115 deaths. Okay. So take note also of the graphical presentation of the daily cases by date of onset of illness that has been reported starting January towards the month of August. Take note of how many cases were reported daily from January No, and notice also the highlighted area towards the end of the graph, no, where we, the readers, are asked to take caution in interpreting the data because this part of the data is still do not represent the actual number of cases, since this data is pertaining to the first week of August, and there might be some delay of reporting yet, no, of cases. So that's why this is a highlighted area. Uh, to put caution on interpreting, because it might appear as if the number of cases is dwindling down, no? But actually there are cases that are not yet reported or recorded yet. Okay? And I want to show you this global timeline, no? Just to have a bigger picture of what came upon us for the past few months, what came upon humanity, what came upon the people of this earth, no, in terms of the COVID cases. Okay, so can we watch this short video? So this is a coronavirus timeline, a visual guide to infections by country. No, the source, you can read it in my slides in the PDF file version. Okay, so if you can see, during the month of January, the number of cases were shooting up in China where the disease has originated. And towards February, the month of February, slowly the number of cases are rising, no, in other countries, particularly Japan, Singapore, Thailand, Korea, Malaysia, Germany, and so on. Okay? With number of cases slowly rising in Korea and Italy towards the end of February and early March, also in Iran, but suddenly mid-March, the number of cases in Italy suddenly were shooting up. And we have seen that from the news. Towards the end of March, the number of cases of USA also suddenly has increased. And towards April, the number of cases went up to 500,000, to 1 million cases towards the end of April. Okay. So around May, the number of cases in the US reached as high as 1 million, with Spain, Italy, UK, Germany, Russia, France, Turkey, and Brazil following through, and Iran. And with China already in the 10th slot with only around 84,000 of number of cases. Okay, so that basically speaks of what happened to us, what came upon us the past few months. And of course, as you try to look for more corona trackers and global timeline of COVID-19, you will see more of these kind of videos. So studying what comes upon people is basically epidemiology, because etymologically speaking, it is derived from the Greek words epi, meaning honor, upon, demos, meaning people, and logos, meaning the study of. So in simple terms, epidemiology is the study of what comes upon us, not what comes upon the people. To elaborate more on the definition, Fries and Sellers defined epidemiology as a study that is concerned with the distribution, determinants of health and disease, of morbidity, of injuries, of mortality in a given population. So basically, epidemiology scope includes health and its determinants, the biologic processes like growth, pregnancy, fertility, and also disease, the disease spectrum, and then the human population. So epidemiology studies the determinants of health, as well as the causes, and the distribution of disease and injuries in the human population. So it is concerned with the frequencies and types of illnesses or injuries in groups of people and with the factors that influence their distribution. So through epidemiology, community health professionals are able to identify and address health problems of the population groups because epidemiology helps us understand disease causation. So when we understand disease causation, we also know how to intervene, or we also know how to prevent or respond to the disease progression. And also the natural history of disease, which basically covers how the disease is progressing if not given up the proper intervention. So it will give us, or it will guide the health workers, the health professionals to plan properly, know on how they are going to address the health problems of the population groups. So epidemiology, through its study and investigation, is actually a borrowed knowledge. It's a discipline borrowing its knowledge from fields of sociology, demography, statistics, microbiology, clinical medicine, and a lot more. Okay. What are the uses of studying epidemiology? To study the history of the health of the population, the rise and fall of diseases, and the changes in their character is one use of epidemiology, that guides health professionals in planning their intervention. Also, useful projections in the future may be possible because of the epidemiologic data. That's why right now, as you try to review the different epidemiologic data on COVID-19, it gives or it guides our health professionals and also our leaders, government leaders, in coming up with plans for the population, for the people. Okay? Because these epidemiologic data are useful projections into the future. To diagnose the health of the community and the conditions of the people is another use of epidemiology. And as it tries to measure the true dimensions and distributions of ill health, it gives us that true picture in terms of incidence of diseases, prevalence of the diseases, disability, and also mortality. As you have seen, the number of deaths, the number of recoveries, the number of new cases being reported. Okay. Another use is to set health problems in perspectives. By how? So by defining their relative importance and identifying groups needing special attention. So this kind of data puts perspective in handling health problems of the population groups. Also to study the workings of the health services and how to improve the services. It's another use of epidemiology. To estimate from the group experience what are the study syndromes, those individual risk on average of disease, the accident and defect, and the chances of avoiding them. So to study these syndromes by describing the distribution and association of clinical phenomena in a given population. Epidemiology also completes the clinical picture of chronic diseases, not only the communicable diseases or infectious diseases, but also the chronic diseases, and tries to describe also their natural history. And another use of epidemiology is searching for causes of health and disease. So with those uses, we can say that epidemiology is the backbone of the prevention of the diseases. Because in order to control a disease effectively, the conditions surrounding the occurrence and the factors focusing on the development must first be known. All right? Now let's move on to the historical perspective. How did epidemiology evolve throughout the years? The development of epidemiology has actually spanned many centuries, going back even biblical times. Okay, since the time of Hippocrates, almost 2,400 years ago, circa 400 BC, where he spoke of the connection between disease and unhealthy environment. So Hippocrates attempted to explain disease occurrence from a rational viewpoint rather than a supernatural perspective. And in his essay entitled On Airs, Waters, and Places, Hippocrates suggested that environmental and host factors such as behaviors might influence the development of disease. And then in 1662, John Grant counted the measurements of births, of deaths, of disease occurrence, no, the patterns of birth and deaths, noting disparities or differences between males and females, also noting or presenting differences in urban or rural areas, occurrence of disease, including the seasonal variation of disease occurrence. Okay. Also, in the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church continued the biblical practice of isolating people with contagious disease, now which is also one focus of epidemiology. And then in 1800s, towards the end of the Middle Age, William Farr built on Grant's work by systematically collecting and analyzing Britain's mortality statistics. That's why he was considered the father of modern vital statistics and surveillance, because he developed many of the basic practices used today in vital statistics and disease classification. Okay? John Snow in 1854 conducted natural experiments where he focused attention on the value of searching out unusual circumstances that can be used to test hypotheses. No, and these are non-experimental hypothesis testing, take note. When he conducted studies of cholera outbreaks, no, both to discover the cause of disease and to prevent its recurrence. John Snow is actually an anesthesiologist who was conducting a series of investigations in London at the time. But later he earned the title the father of field epidemiology because of his investigations about the cholera outbreak. This was 20 years before the development of the microscope, take note. No? So because of his work, uh, because his work classically illustrates the sequence, no, from the descriptive epidemiology to hypothesis generation to testing that hypothesis, which is already part of the analytic epidemiology, and then later on to application. No, that's why his work, no, has a good impact, a great impact on the practice of epidemiology. There were also intervention studies later on, experiments with cowpox vaccination of Jenners in 1976, and then Fletcher's experiment also towards the end of the 18th century and in 1905, when the no that experiment of Fletcher is on the protective effect of cured rice against beriberi, no, that in 1905. And then in the, again, towards the end of the 18th century during the French Revolution, no, as it ended, where there was an interest in public health and preventive medicine, thereby uh, facilitating the development of the epidemiologic approach to disease. No? So because of that growing interest, instead of only focusing on communicable or infectious diseases, towards the end of towards 1930s and 1940s, hindi lang infectious, but also non-infectious diseases were also part of the study in epidemiology. Okay, and then during the period of World War II, there were more epidemiologic studies conducted, um, and also there was explosion, no, in the development of research methods and the theoretical underpinnings of epidemiology. And then in 1960s to 1970s, there are more studies conducted where health workers applied epidemiologic methods to eradicate naturally occurring smallpox worldwide, which was at that time is an achievement of unprecedented proportions. And then in 1980s, epidemiology was extended to the studies of injuries and violence. So towards the end of 18th century, ang focus ay infectious diseases, but later on until 1930s and 1940s, start na ng focus on non-infectious diseases, and then now in 1980s, injuries and violence naman now became the focus of epidemiology. And then in 1990s, the related fields of molecular and genetic epidemiology uh, also expanded, no, the epidemiology in itself, as the study tried to look at specific pathways, molecules, and genes that influence risk of developing diseases. Okay, so um, also at the same time, infectious diseases continued to challenge epidemiologies as new diseases emerge. No, like Ebola virus, the HIV, and AIDS, also the SARS, no, the severe acute respiratory syndrome, and also the drug resistant Mycobacterium tuberculosis, no, or the drug resistant TB, tuberculosis, also avian influenza, the MERS-CoV, or the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus. And then in 1990s to 2001, because of the attack, no, on September 11 in 2001, of the Towers in New York, epidemiology studies started to focus on biologic warfare and bioterrorism. Okay? And today, public health workers throughout the world accept and use epidemiology regularly to characterize the health of their communities and to solve day-to-day problems, whether large problems or small problems. All right?